recommendations and the focus of them. And it really was a very optimistic moment that made it feel like a lot of the work that we're doing and a lot of what we were going to address as a group and a committee really are achievable and really are things that we can do if all of us are collectively able to bring our different life experience, the values of the different constituencies that we represent, and really focus on our common interest, putting aside some of our historic positions that have gotten in the way of building some consensus and moving forward on some of these really critical points. If we can get service providers, business leaders, and progressives to stand together on the third door recommendations, I'm really optimistic that the discourse of this group can rise to put forward meaningful solutions to these challenges that we face. And I really look forward to working with all of you to shape those policies. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Prince, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. I'm so glad to be here today to do this important work with our elected officials and our members with lived experience. By way of introduction, my name is Ed Prince, City Council member, Sound City Association Vice President. One of the reasons I became an elected official is to solve problems and to be a problem solver. And so I'm really looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and coming up with a multifaceted regional approach to homelessness.
Thank you. Were there others who wanted to speak? There will be, Councilmember McDermott.
Thank you. I too am pleased to be participating in our first meeting, and just very briefly will say that I think this is a very unique opportunity to work as a region with key players at the table, and I hope we can bring to it the urgency for which the emergency demands. The emergency that was formally declared in November of 2015 of homelessness within our region, and I hope that we can bring with it the lessons in urgent action we've seen in the pandemic that we have taken in the last several months. We can bring that same urgency and immediate action to homelessness within our region, and I look forward to working with all of you in that end.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Reagan Dunn here. Good morning.
Hi, Reagan.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I wanted to jump in as well and appreciate the opportunity to speak and just say that, I'm delighted to be part of this group. It's an historic initiative or effort that is much needed in our community. We have very significant homeless challenges, and different communities are failing or succeeding at different rates. But one thing we see on those that succeed is they have a truly regional approach to a governing strategy, and they also have bipartisan cooperation to make it work. And I come to this organization with a bipartisan spirit. Some of you might recall 15 or so years ago, Rob McKenna was on the Sound Transit Board, and Rob didn't, and he'll be very candid with you if you ask him, didn't agree with the basic mission of Sound Transit. And that is not the way that I look at this issue at all. I very much want to reduce homelessness. I want to work in a bipartisan fashion to do it. And so those basic themes are working alongside all of you in that effort. However, we're going to bring a little bit different perspective, and then I want to make sure, as I'm sure you do, that tax dollars are being used wisely and in the most efficient way, that we are employing very important tools of measurement and accountability to the dollars that we are spending, that we aren't sort of looking at some of the traditional ways that we measuring outputs, a number of people that are successfully perhaps housed or treated with addiction or food bank, but rather measuring the number of people that are still sleeping on our streets every night as one of the indicators of success. So outcome and accountabilities are important for me as well. So I look forward really to working with all of you, and I know we have a very daunting and significant challenge before us, but I know that we can, working together, get through it. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, Reagan. Do any of the other members, particularly those with lived experience, want to chime in at this point?
Yeah, sure. I'll chime in.
Kirk.
This is Kirk McLean from Solid Ground.
Mhm.
I would just like to say that, first of all, I really am honored to be a part of this group. And I really appreciate the fact that you, Dow, and the mayor and all these important folks have decided to put their heads together again and take another whack at this brick wall that we're fighting that we call homelessness. And with the addition of the coronavirus in the mix, that makes things a lot more difficult than they probably would be. But I would just like to say that I appreciate the opportunity to work with you folks and to come up with new ideas and to look at the core reasons why people become homeless, and also look at the reasons, address those reasons based on a knowledge of what really causes people to stay home, stay out there, and not be able to get their lives back together. I can personally say that I spent 5 years on the street myself, from 2009 to 2014. And so I know there is a pathway out of homelessness, but it does take some assistance. And people need to know how to access the services that are provided by the different social service organizations, including mine, like Solid Ground, and all the other organizations that are putting their heads together and rolling their sleeves up and working on this problem. So I appreciate the fact that I'm here. I'm honored to be here, and I'm willing to learn. I know there's a lot about how government runs and how things get done on this level that I've never experienced, but I'm willing to learn those things and listen and hopefully provide some input from a perspective of someone who has been out there and who has experienced the entire spectrum of homelessness. So I get what it looks like, what it smells like, what it feels like. And I also know, at least from my own personal experience, what it takes to get out of that life and to get stable and get yourself housed and get yourself an income and become a productive citizen. So I've been there, I've been through it, and I know what it looks like. And so I'm willing to share all of the knowledge that I have with you guys, and to also learn from all of the folks on this committee about how we get this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you for stepping up to serve. Madam President, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Are you talking to me?
I am. You're the only president here, right? I don't know. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to say good morning, and also express my deep gratitude for an opportunity to be here representing the Seattle City Council. I'm Lorena Gonzalez. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet, I think I've met most of you in some kind of regional capacity, but I serve as the council president for the Seattle City Council. Like my colleague, Councilmember Lewis and Mayor Durkin have already said, I think the challenges that lay before us are significant, certainly, but not unworthy of this type of level of attention. And I'm really grateful to be part of a group that has, with some of its own challenges, come together to figure out how we can roll up our sleeves and really address this issue in a coordinated and collaborative fashion. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here representing the perspective of the Seattle City Council, and the many thousands of constituents that we collectively represent. I do want to acknowledge that I'm specifically interested in not just establishing those collaborative, coordinated relationships amongst the region, but for me in particular, and for the City Council, there were some remaining issues after the RPC met last year, and I'm looking forward to digging into many of those issues. I won't go through the list of what those issues are here right now, because I think there'll be an opportunity to address those in the agenda. But while I am very grateful for the opportunity to be here, I also want to acknowledge and recognize that there are some existing remaining issues that I think will be critical to, and continue to be critical to, ensuring the success of this regional effort. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on addressing some of those structural issues that I believe will lead to the greatest opportunity for success to serve the people we represent, that we are accountable to, and to serve the folks who have lived experiences with homelessness. And really that's what it's all about, is making sure that we're centering our work, our efforts, and our thoughts on the day-to-day experiences of what it means to live unsheltered throughout our region. So I will continue to be motivated by that, as it being my North Star, is to just make sure that we are centering the lived experiences of folks, including those who sit on this board, but also those who they represent outside of the board, to make sure that we are bringing those voices in to center all of our proposals on those evidence-based strategies that are informed in context by those lived experiences. So thank you so much for an opportunity to, again, say good morning, and looking forward to digging into the hard but important work that lays ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Jonathan Hempel was having some technological challenges, but Zanetta Reed was able to see us, and we weren't able to see her earlier. But on behalf of your fellow committee members, I want to say we see you. And would you share some thoughts with us?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I am just super excited to be a part of this and be able to bring my perspective and just how homelessness impacts families and others in general, and just bring to the table how really, if we start by building relationships and getting those the tools that they need to be successful, I think some real change can come about. So I'm just excited to be a part of this, and thank you for having me.
Great. Jonathan? Yes? No?
Hold on.
There you are. Gotcha.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. I'm having some technical difficulty. Sorry that I'm not on video. My phone usually lags when I try to do that, so that's why I have my favorite icon, King County, of King County himself.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to say a few words. First of all, I'm very grateful to be on this board. I'm honored, the committee, and I'm honored to work with you all. And first, I just want to outline the fact that we stand on the shoulders of giants right now, and that this work really began in the community, and eventually, the community was heard. And, Dow and Mayor Durkin, you guys heard the community, and you implemented this plan that pretty much blossomed in the creation of this regional authority. And so I thank you for that. But we also must realize that this is not just a public public health crisis or economic crisis. This is a moral crisis, and it can't be anything less, because of the fact that, when you go down the street and you see people who are basically deprived of the very fundamental thing that it takes to be a part of our society, at home. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring that to the forefront. This morning I was alerted to a fact that right now that there's a sweep going on Weller, 12th and Weller. And I just wanted to say that, that's not the way we should do things. And that doesn't center the humanity of the people who are going through the struggles that they are. And I hope that we can challenge that and change that, and ultimately change the narrative that Seattle was dying into one that Seattle was reviving, the one that Redmond is reviving, one that Auburn is reviving, one that all of King County is reviving, and one that ultimately as King County is thriving. And we need to do that. The only way we can do that is by centering those who are most impacted with the lived experience, and also by fully living out through our commitment to racial equity and change, and our theory of change. So I thank you, and I look forward to the good work that you do and bearing more witness to it as we embark on this journey. That's all.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, and thanks to all the committee members. At various points in this meeting, it was a little clunky because I'm trying to scan around and figure out who's raising their hand, but at various points we're going to engage in group discussion, and we're going to shift to the official Zoom way of doing this. So to ask questions or share a comment, please raise your hand by clicking the button on the right side of your screen. And if you're not on Zoom, you just have to chime in. But then you'll be entered into a queue, into a line, and called on an order. When the discussions formally begin, Sarah Dickmeyer, who's our Zoom host, will call on you in the order in which you raise your hand. And then after your turn, you can go get in line again to speak again if you wish. We're all navigating the new dynamics of virtual meetings together. And I want to thank Sarah, who's my executive assistant and the person who keeps me organized, for volunteering to lead us through the complexities of this new way of doing things. And if you have any problems with raising your hand or muting or unmuting or any other sort of Zoom etiquette issues, please comment using the chat function, and Sarah and our staff team will work to troubleshoot. And obviously, if you're for some reason not getting through, just go ahead and speak up. We don't want to stand on ceremony, but we do want it to be somewhat orderly. And now it's time for us to dive into the details of what it will take for us to truly launch this new King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And to start that out, I wanted to turn it over to Leo Floor. He is our Director of the King County Department of Community and Human Services, and to Jason Johnson, the Director of the Seattle Human Services Department. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. Good morning, committee members. Jason and I will spend a brief period of time here to situate the committee and this meeting today in the context of what has been a little bit more than 2 years of preparatory work to get us to this point, and then to look forward for about 1.5 years to the immediate tasks that the governing committee will have before it as we transition from our current structure into the new structure. During this time, also we will have the chat function open, and until the committee decides upon the method by which in subsequent meetings you'll receive public comment, the chat box will be open for anybody watching or attending virtually the meeting to enter public comment, and all of that will be recorded as a matter of public record. So with that, I'll hand it over to a partner in this work for 2 years now, and we've worked very closely together and look forward to further joining the organizations going forward. Jason, please.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Leo. I have to say, just out the gate, this is very exciting that this first meeting is underway. I know that it has taken some time to stand up this first part of the governance structure of the King County Regional Homeless Authority, but it's really good to be with you and good to see that this meeting is taking place. My name is Jason Johnson, and I have the great privilege of serving Mayor Durkin and the people of Seattle as Director of the Human Services Department, and so thankful to work in close partnership with Leo and his team at DCHS on the regional issue of homelessness, and to collaborate with him on standing up the regional authority. Leo and I wanted to highlight that there's a lot of work happening in parallel. While we're still in the process of fully standing up the King County Regional Homeless Authority governance structure, we're also thinking through some important operational details related to standing up the King County Regional Homeless Authority. Leo and I have been working together to stand up a number of project-specific work groups and teams to both consider the transition of our department's work moving over to the regional authority, but also making important considerations about the future of the regional authority ahead of hiring a CEO who ultimately will be expected to implement our regional response in partnership with you. These work groups and teams have been inclusive of Seattle and King County staff at all levels, and many have included people with lived experience of homelessness and those with experience navigating systems. Operational work groups have been focused on issues such as human resources and change management and support of our workforce, finance, budget, and treasury, program and contract investment migration, data, accountability, performance, as well as co-location of our city and county teams at the Yesler building. And I would highlight most critically a work group focused on operating in a way that is guided by the adopted theory of change and that center on racial equity. In order for us to have an organization in place to carry out the regional work to address homelessness, these work groups and their proposals had to start immediately. There is much work for us to do together, and the project timeline offers some guidance to you as to when you can expect this work to be completed. I'll hand it back over to Leo to speak specifically about the timeline and the important role you'll play in moving that work forward.
Thank you, Jason. And Sarah Dickmeyer has projected onto the screen what is a little bit of an iVision test of a document. We have also distributed that document to all members of the committee, and it will be posted for a public review afterwards. Rather than going through all of the individual blocks, the purpose of the document, again, is to take the work that has happened to date that Jason described, and then to depict for committee members in the bright red boxes 3 key structural decisions that you all will make in the coming months, and then 3 key products or plans that the committee will make decisions about going forward. So the 3 decisions that will come before the committee to establish the full structure of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority are first the seating of an implementation board. And the implementation board is defined within the interlocal agreement. It is a 13-member body, and that board will have the persistent day-to-day oversight of the activities of the regional authority. And the role of the governing committee will be to provide for a nominating committee that will then seat the members of that board, and then that board will assume its ILA defined role. So that first decision, we do anticipate will come as soon as the July meeting of this committee. And again, that would be a specific decision to approve a set of persons who will then serve on that implementation board. The next structural decision will be, and I do see several comments that are saying that it is blurry. So again, I will seek here to describe it, and then know that folks are do have this in your email, and then we'll post it again. But after seating an implementation board, the next big decision that comes before this committee is to hire a chief executive officer for the Regional Homelessness Authority. The structure within the ILA requires that that is a joint decision between the members of this governing committee and then the members of the implementation board, who you will confirm, and that the 2 bodies together will make the final hiring decision for the CEO. I'll be followed here shortly by Bobby Humes, who will discuss the process to present choices for the CEO, but we are planning right now for the implementation board and the governing committee to make that final decision in September of this year. And then the third structural decision that this committee will make will be to affirm an advisory committee. So this is that 3rd level of governance that will be nominated by the region's Continuum of Care board. And so with an implementation board in July, a CEO hopefully by September, and then an advisory committee also confirmed by this group also in September, and then we will have established the unified governance structure that the ILA contemplates. The 3 plans that will also come before this committee for ultimate approval. First, once the CEO is in place, the CEO will have 60 days to present this committee with an initial staff hiring plan. And the purpose of that plan will be to approve expenditures so that the CEO can then begin to bring on the staff for the Regional Homelessness Authority, who can then receive the programs and funding that we will transition from Seattle's Human Services Department and King County's Department of Community and Human Services to the new regional authority. After establishing that and approving that first governing committee approved staffing plan, the next product will be an initial work plan. And the initial work plan is akin to an implementation plan or a set of objectives that the regional authority must accomplish within its first 18 months. And that will be something that comes before the implementation board and the governing committee. And then, and we are now all the way out at the right-hand side of the chart that is too blurry to read. But the final product or plan that the governing committee will approve in order to fully realize the articulation of strategy for the new regional authority will be a 5-year plan. So those are the 3 structures, and those are the 3 plans that really become the frame around which a lot of the work of this committee will take shape going forward over the next few months. And then the timeline for the Regional Homelessness Authority itself, just to articulate that, as Jason mentioned, we have been working to create all of the different pieces and lay all the different foundations and start all of the legal structures that will allow us on January 1st of 2021 to have an initially operational King County Regional Homelessness Authority. We will have hired a lot of the essential staff before then, but that is the first date upon which King County Regional Homelessness Authority will begin to exercise the powers that it is created to have. And that we will continue the transition of programming, of staffing, of data systems over the course of the first half of 2021, with a final goal of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority by the end of 2021, having full control over all of its assets, having the ability to begin to administer RFPs, requests for proposal, so that beginning in 2022, it will oversee fully unified contracts rather than the current regime of multiple contracts from multiple governments for the same program. So that is our overview of the timeline, and happy to entertain any questions or clarifications from members of the committee before we proceed.
Remember, Sarah's going to be taking your questions here. So,
yep. First up is Council President Gonzalez.
Hi, thank you so much, Sarah. Leo, thank you for going through this particular chart. You know, I had access to the chart on email and could barely read it. So I'm gonna just make a quick little request, not really a question, a request that we somehow figure out how to maybe break this chart apart so it's a little bit more legible and accessible to both those members of the committee and the public. I think I saw in the chat function a lot of concern that it is just not a readable document. So would that be possible for you and your staff to just sort of perhaps maybe break it down a little bit more so that we can see the granular detail that is included in the timeline? I just think that timeline is so important, and I have a lot of interest in making sure that both we can see all the details and the general public can see the details as well.
Thank you, Council President. Absolutely, we will. We'll also post it as we distributed it in multiple formats, some of which lend themselves to zooming better. You will also see this document probably at every meeting, and hear loud and clear for reasons of clarity and accessibility. We'll make sure that we get formats that continue to work better so that folks can see and understand their content.
I appreciate that. I imagine we're going to be doing these meetings via Zoom for at least the foreseeable future. So something that is actually suitable to the Zoom feature would be really helpful. I appreciate that.
If only one of our cities was home to the world's largest software company. If only.
Just I trust that somebody can figure this out.
Okay. Sarah, anyone else?
Nope, that's it.
Well, we're in grave danger of getting ahead of schedule here, but Mayor Durkin, I think it's off to you then.
Thanks. During this process, we knew that we were on a pretty tight timeline, and in respect from that, the City Council and I had set aside about $1.6 million for startup costs for the authority, including some of the early staffing and setup costs. We also knew that choosing the first person to run this was going to be one of the most critical decisions that we made. And so our HR department has moved forward to identify a number of different kind of recruiting firms that could be available for, of course, not supplanting the decision-making authority of this board, but to give us something from which to choose so that we did not have to start that process after this meeting. I really believe that the collaborative process between this governing board and the implementation board is going to be really one of the central things we do to show that this can work. So it also tells us the importance down the road, looking at that chart. Who we put on an implementation board is really going to matter very much. And then how we select the CEO is, the first leader of this organization, I think really is going to be a person who's going to have a whole range of skills and ability to listen and implement. And so I want to turn it over to our HR director, Bobby Humes, who will tell you a little bit about what we've done to identify firms that could do the search for this so that this board would feel comfortable in making that decision. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bobby. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Mayor Durkin. So what I want to do, as Mayor Durkin set up, is give a high-level overview of the work we've done so far. In early February, we released our RFP, which closed in mid-March. And so where we are currently is our focus is to, we've brought together an evaluation team. That evaluation committee is made up of individuals who represent Sound Cities, those in the region with lived experience, King County employees, City of Seattle employees, King County Executive Office members and Mayor's Office members, as well as King County Council and Seattle Council members as well. And our nationwide search, again, wrapped up in March. And so what the focus is right now is for that evaluation team to review the firm's qualifications and make recommendations to the governing committee based on a shared rubric that evaluation team created. And so you can see here that our meeting is tomorrow. And so my hopes are that one of our firms will be selected for the process moving forward. And so what we can expect in a future timeline is for the joint governing committee and implementation board recruitment of the qualified candidate based on the firm's work, and that same group of folks would be moving to select the CEO in September, with the CEO being hired and in place in October of this year. So very aggressive timeline, and it's very important that we find a CEO that has that ability for the startup mentality of creating an organization that has not existed, but also can leverage the current talent and resources in the region to best position this organization for success. Any questions?
So I would just add, I know that people have been dealing with a whole range of things in their day jobs and their lives right now. If there are any additional qualifications or information you think you need, please feel free to contact Bobby if there's things you feel the committee needs to read, the evaluation committee, because at our next meeting, we will make the decision on which firm we're retaining. And we just really want to keep this process underway. So if folks have things that in reflection, they want to make sure that in choosing the search firm itself is important, please reach out to Bobby or Leo or any of the folks there to make sure you get your thoughts in. Thanks so much.
I think I saw Council President Gonzalez wanting to say something.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go for it. Councilmember Gonzalez, you're first.
Thank you so much, Bobby, for that outline. So obviously, I think there's probably pretty wide agreement amongst this group that the selection of the CEO is probably one of the more important decisions we can make, just based on how the structure of this authority is designed. So I really appreciate that we are looking at a consultant firm that will not replace or substitute for our judgment, but will assist us in identifying some qualified candidates that could perhaps rise to the challenge. So I didn't quite hear you go into details about how that vetting process of the consultant firm will work. Sort of who are the individuals who will be responsible for identifying which consultant we're going to select, and sort of what's the loop back feed to this group. And then second, I'd like to get an understanding from you, Bobby, about how this search process, for lack of a better term, for a consultant to do this work is being asked to center issues around experience and equity, for example, and in particular, whether this individual is going to have expertise in being able to evaluate potential candidates' commitment and experience and track record in addressing issues of deep, profound racial equity in this area of work.
Absolutely. I do my best to unpack that. Let me know if I miss anything. So the order of operations is that the evaluation committee will be making a recommendation to the governing committee for the firm to move forward. They will not be moving forward, signing any type of agreement, but pretty much making a recommendation for the governing committee to review. As far as how we thought about the vetting process, we wanted firms who had several factors to be met. One was experience in the public sector. Another was experience recruiting executives with diverse backgrounds. Another factor was firms that had their own talent management system, so that if they didn't have current clients who met our needs, they would be able to move through an applicant tracking process on their own without using our systems, and that the firms had experience working in direct service in sort of health and human services roles, and so that was the focus there. To get into the weeds and sort of who those evaluation members are, we have a large group of folks. Did you want me to name them, or I kind of listed all of the different represented bodies that are there. They're Sound Cities, folks with lived experience, King County employees, City of Seattle employees, members from the exec's office, members from Mayor Durkin's office, King County Council representative, and also City of Seattle Council representatives.
Great. I don't need you to go through the full list of each individual name, but I appreciate you reviewing once again the categories. So I appreciate that. And then the last question that I haven't heard you speak about are the issues of how equity and the firm's experience around equity will be weighted in this evaluation process.
Sure, that is a part of the evaluation rubric for the firms to present to us their track record on staffing executive positions from an equity lens. So we our RFP called out for that as a desire, and so that's one of the points we'll be evaluating through.
I appreciate that, and I just want to sort of note that at least for me, it's really important that we make sure that we are able to identify somebody at the firm level who is going to have that lens of being able to help us identify an executive who really truly understands those equity issues. We all know and had introductory remarks in this meeting, as well as many other meetings, that we acknowledge that there's a disproportionate impact on communities of color as it relates to the experience of homelessness. And so I want to make sure that the firm has a culture of understanding that, and that they're going to translate that culture into the process of assisting us in identifying candidates at the executive level who also deeply understand that disproportionality component of the search process and sort of a basic foundation of the qualifications of whoever advances through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
I think Jonathan's hand was up next, and then Angela, and then Mayor Durkin. Or Mayor Durkin, did you want to respond to the previous comment? Was that why you had your hand up? Okay, and then we'll go with Jonathan, and then with Mayor Burney. Go ahead, Mayor Durkin.
Yeah, I just really want to thank Council President Gonzalez for her comments and assure her that from the very beginning, we made sure that all of these processes would be centered on equity, because we know that the disproportionate impact on communities of color is real. And that if we're going to be dealing with this issue, we have to do it not just from an equity lens, but we have to have systemic solutions in place that deal with those very real issues. And so getting a search firm with those experiences, as Bobby mentioned, it was in the rubric. Bobby has been tremendous in leading this and making sure that every step of the way we're centering on that. And I think the executive staff has been similarly emphatic that we have to do that, but I think it is really important for us at every meeting to remind ourselves how important that is every step of the way. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Jonathan Hempel.
Oh, no, I was just going to actually ask the similar questions to Council President Gonzalez. I think she answered them greatly, and I just wanted to reiterate the notion that we really do need to ensure that the firm that we hire has it's really steep and the racial equity lens and focus, and that they're going to translate that into all the work that they'll do, and that will translate to the new CEO that will be able to implement the work. So that's all.
Great, thank you. Mayor Bernie.
Thank you. Thanks for that background. Is it possible for us to get the names of the firms that are being considered, as well as a copy of the rubric, so we have an understanding of what you said the selection panel or evaluation panel will be looking at? You could keep us better informed of that.
Yes, I'll coordinate with the team staffing this group and provide that information to everyone.
Thank you.
Mayor Durkin, we're wanting to have additional discussion, if any, around this issue, and then I think that we're being asked to have an affirmation by the group of the process and the timing. Do you want to go ahead and lead that part of the conversation?
Yes, I think that Angela raised a really good point, and Bobby, let's make sure we can get to the staff that's supporting this and circulate to everyone on the call kind of the process that's happened to date, the firms that are under consideration, the rubric, and the list of people, so they're comfortable with that. If anyone has direct feedback on that, please respond. We want to be flexible. We know it's hard to come together in Zoom, and everyone's got a lot on their plate. Is there any other than more information and opportunity to respond on that? Are there other questions for Bobby in particular on the process they've gone through, or things that you would need in advance of the next meeting, so that when we present on the firms that have responded, that you feel you can make an informed decision? We just want to make sure everyone gets what they need ahead of time and far enough in ahead that you can have a chance to review it.
And I think Jonathan may have had a follow-up.
Yes. I just wanted to ask, in the rubric, Mr. Humes, was it also part of the fact to have a firm that has worked with diverse populations in terms of like geography, such as suburban and urban? Because I know that what we wanted from my work that I've had in the past, that you need a tailored approach is the most necessary usually. And so I just wanted to make sure that was being considered, because we're not just focusing on Seattle, we're focusing on all of King County.
I would say that the scope of the work was communicated. As far as that being in the rubric, we'll make that addition for tomorrow morning's meeting.
Bless, thank you.
Okay. So I think we're looking for an affirmation, which is not a formal vote, and I'm not sure what an affirmation looks like in the context of Zoom. But I guess I would ask it this way. Is everyone okay with the process and the timing of the CEO recruitment and hiring that's been presented here today? Do you need any further clarification, or I guess to the point of affirmation, does anybody have an objection? I see smiling faces.
I had one quick question.
Yeah, Kirk.
Hi. As far as recruiting for this CEO, are we recruiting someone outside of Washington State? Is this a national thing? Is like someone from the East Coast? Could that person be a candidate as well as someone that's from Renton or from somewhere inside Washington State?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's absolutely. And the first thing we're going to do is just pick the firm that's helping recruit, And the next step coming, preview of coming attractions, which is what you're right on top of, is what are we looking for and how broadly do we want that recruitment to be? And I think that that's the materials we also will be sending to the whole committee so that you can be looking at, and we can have a discussion about making sure that as the recruitment firm, once we select them, that they're looking and using the qualifications we think are most important. But I don't presume to make that decision for the committee, but I think that the broader the search is, the better we will be to get a range of candidates that might serve us.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I'm going to, hearing no objection, consider the process and timing affirmed by the group, and I look forward to ultimately being presented with great candidates for us to choose from. Anyone who's been involved in one of these national searches knows that it can either produce a surplus of remarkable candidates and give you a difficult choice, or sometimes you don't find what you want and you have to keep searching. So fingers crossed that we're going to get lots of folks enthusiastic about engaging in the mission of this organization, and we'll be able to choose someone who is great at carrying it forward. Thanks everyone for that. I wanted to move to the next section of the agenda. One of the most important tasks we have is before us is to create the implementation board. These are the people who will truly be responsible for leading the work of the Homelessness Authority. They're going to be leaders from throughout the community who volunteer to apply their diverse skills and experience to really taking on this intractable challenge that we've had for so long with homelessness. And for a status update on the process of selecting and appointing the implementation board, I'm going to turn it back over to Leo. Leo.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. The purpose of this portion of the meeting is similarly to seek your affirmation on a proposal. And this is a proposal that will result in this committee in a meeting in July receiving a slate of persons for your confirmation as the implementation board. The proposal that I'll outline is the work of a team of staff, many of whom staff the members who are represented on this committee. At this point, it is important to note that Ms. Reed, Mr. McLean, and Mr. Hemphill do not yet have the same level of staffing as other members of the committee do. We are working right now to secure an independently funded source for that staffing so that we can establish parity of staffing access for all members of the governing committee. And we will be reaching out to Mr. McLean, Ms. Reed, and Mr. Hemphill after this to establish what that looks like and then invite them into the process that I am about to describe. The interlocal agreement identifies appointing authorities. The appointing authorities are all the bodies that have actually appointed the members of the committee before us right now, and then tasks those appointing authorities with establishing a nominating committee for the implementation board. The proposal here is that the staff committee that has already formed with participation from all members of the governing committee, with the exception so far or to date of the members of the governing committee who represent lived experience. We will invite you, Mr. McLean, Ms. Reed, and Mr. Hemphill as members of that nominating committee yourselves until we have staff for you who can do that work for you. But to have you come together with that staff group right now, and then the staff group process would be to take the suggestions of all of the members of the governing committee and the appointing authorities, and then to assemble choices of a slate of candidates who then the governing committee can consider in one group, and then you can take your votes in July as to whether to accept the slate as proposed or to modify it. As the executive mentioned, the intersection of experiences, qualifications, and ability to represent different perspectives and identities comes up with a pretty complex composite that the 13 members of the implementation board must satisfy in aggregate. And that's the purpose for proposing to you all that the nominating committee really come together and do a lot of that, what some folks have called three-dimensional chess, to ensure that we're getting the right combination of people to satisfy all of the ordinance requirements, but then also to meet the characteristics that you all have enumerated here in terms of the ability to really lead an important issue in ways that are effective, equitable, so that we get the outcomes that we're after. So the formal proposal for which I seek your affirmation as the governing committee is that the existing staffing group that has come together to prepare this meeting, plus Ms. Reed, Mr. McLean, and Mr. Hemphill, until we're able to provide you with your own independent staff, and then at that point, that staff, if you would like to empower them to do that, that committee becomes the nominating committee that the ILA requires, that each of the appointing authorities supplies to that nominating committee the candidates that you would propose for membership on the implementation board, and that each appointing authority would pursue its own independent process to identify those persons, and that the nominating committee would meet as frequently as is necessary to take those appointing authority nominations, build them into a composite slate, ensure that it satisfies all of the interlocal agreement requirements, and then re-present that slate to this governing committee at your July meeting.
So do we have discussion on the selection process for the implementation board, the appointment process?
First question is from Jonathan.
Yes, I'm sorry. I have all these questions, questions. So I just wanted clarification. It was my understanding that the the Lived Experience Governance would work with the Lived Experience Coalition as well. And then I wanted to know, just to clarify, we would first, we'll go into this staff situation with Sarah and what's already established, and then we would decide our own staffing, because we have a lot of, I think everybody on this call in terms of representing lived experience has been in contact with an individual who has said on staffing already, and we've already kind of decided. So can you just explain that a little bit more to me and just clarify?
Thank you, Mr. Hemphill. So I hear two questions in there, and please let me know if I don't address both of them or if I missed one. The first question is as to the process by which the lived experience leaders on call will be able to participate in the nominating committee and then also offer nominations of persons for the implementation board. We're about to use a lot of acronyms. The Continuum of Care Board, the COC board, that was the appointing authority for the lived experience leaders, took a similar vote to allow, exactly as you described, Mr. Hemphill, for the 3 members of the governing committee, plus participation from the Lived Experience Coalition or other members that you might choose, to identify the members that you all would propose for inclusion in the implementation board, and then that would then go to that nominating committee for the collective construction of a implementation board slate. So does that answer the first question, Mr. Hemphill?
Yes.
Excellent. And then the second question that I heard you asking is specific to by what means will we establish parity of staffing for you, Ms. Reed, and Mr. McLean. And the process that we do have in place here is King County, Seattle, and the current continuum of organization are seeking your input and direction on what staffing characteristics you would like. We have a small amount of money, a small amount of public funds that we are seeking a independent organization to start that staffing model, and then we are collectively in conversation with a couple of private foundations who have actually expressed interest in providing long-term funding for your staffing. I think certainly our role is to secure the resources and provide the choices, and then present you all with the ability to direct how you would like those resources to actually go out and then result in a long-term staffing capacity for the lived experience leaders of both the governing committee and the implementation board once seated.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Floor.
Up next, we have Ed Prince.
Good morning, Leo. Hey, I've got a two-part process question. One, because appointing this implementation board is so important, is there any work that we need to be doing in June to that end? And also, it's very important that we make sure we get our meeting scheduled well in advance so that we don't lose any momentum. And not that we need another meeting, but if we need to meet in June, I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Prince. As I understand it right now, we have a staff group, and Sound Cities Association's participation in that staff group is through the director and then I think 2 supporting staff. And we have been meeting on a weekly basis and will continue to meet with whatever frequency we need to provide to this governing committee in July, that slate. The process so far has been for each of the representatives on the staffing committee to go back to their principals. So you, Mayor Bernie, and then Mayor Backus in this case, for you all to provide sort of input to your staff group through that nominating process. And then if you are proposing an additional meeting for the governing committee before that July, what I think might be a July 2nd proposed meeting right now, I certainly would defer to the governing committee on that. But we are currently working so that we continually are speaking to the principals here, and then we'll provide to you collectively a joint proposal on, I think, July 2nd.
Great. Up next, I saw Councilmember McDermott's hand, but you're all done. Okay, great. Mayor Angela Burney.
Thank you. I just want to echo Councilmember Prince's comment about meetings. I would actually prefer to have regular monthly meetings. I think there's just a lot of work to get done, and we've been, and I know all of us have a lot of meetings, so I take that into consideration. However, we haven't met. This is the first time this whole year. I would rather get progress reports than all of a sudden us have to meet again in July and have to make these decisions without having any opportunity to really talk together again. So that's one comment I have, and make them regular, just like we do with the other regional committees, where they're just this set time every month at a particular time, so we can all make that predictable. So that's one thing. I'm showing a little bit concern about the nominating committee that you're talking about. As our group, Sound Cities, we have a staff member for us. I don't know who else is on that group, and so I think to some of the other lived experience individuals that are here with us today in our meeting as well, I don't know what that looks like for them as well to have one person representing. I think that there are multiple staff members from the city and the county that are participating in this, so I kind of want to get a better feel for what that looks like. Early on when we were working on the language for the authority, I felt it was really important that this implementation board does have a wide distribution of skills and talents and region, and all of those different things go together and to really make a very good functioning board. But I also want to make sure we're continuing that thought in how we're putting this implementation board together. I don't have a great solution, unfortunately, but I do have some concerns about how it's been described right now. So I don't know if you can if others have comments about that as well, but that's kind of my feeling right now about that.
Thank you, Mayor Bernie. As to the structure of the staff group that I am proposing on behalf of that staff group to become the nominating committee, it is an independent choice for each of the members of this governing committee how you would like to be represented there. Right now, each of the council members has a staff member who is participating. The Sound Cities Association has sent its executive director as well as an additional staff member, and then the offices of both the Mayor of Seattle and the King County 2 staff members in one case 3 staff members who are participating in that group. And that was to establish parity of numbers in a very sort of balanced way between all of the appointing authorities. And then with the one defect that is serious, but we now have people in place to cure, that you have pointed out, Mayor Bernie, which is participation and representation from the lived experience leaders of the governing committee. So that's the composition of it. And I think it is squarely within the power of any member of the governing committee here to change your representation on that staff group. And that I think we all on that staff group are there at the pleasure of all of you. So if you would prefer that not to be Sound Cities Association and your staff, or combination of your personal staff plus Sound Cities Association, I think that is squarely a decision for each of the members of the committee.
No, I wasn't implying that. I just wanted to get a good idea of like who is part of that group and who they're representing. So a list of those members would be probably helpful for all of us as well.
I would interject that under committee business and potential action, which is the next agenda item, one of the items is establishing regular meetings on the third Thursday of every month from 10 a.m. till noon. So we will, if we get to this, have monthly meetings set up by the end of this meeting. Others on the implementation board appointment coordination process.
We had.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
sorry. We had Nancy Backus raise her hand, but you lowered it. Do you still need to speak? Nope. Okay, great. And then Zanetta Reed had a question. Did you need to speak?
Yeah, I was just wondering, in these boards and the hiring and the implementation, is there somebody with lived experience on that hiring panel, or, you know, those boards?
Thank you, Ms. Reed. I think that is the defect that we were seeking to cure by seeking full-time staff for the members with lived experience. As to whether or not any of the current members, to take your question, themselves have lived experience who are on the hiring panel, I don't know the answer to that question. They're there to represent their appointing authorities, but we do recognize that the nominating committee must have members of lived experience. And then I think what is the other part of your question, the implementation board itself must have at least 3 members who have lived experience of homelessness, and that you actually have the authority, in combination with Mr. McLean and Mr. Hemphill, to make those nominations to ensure that there is also representation at the implementation board level. And then the ILA also specifies a number of other equity-centric requirements within the implementation board, including the fact that the implementation board must feature at least 1 member who has experience implementing pro-equity policies in an organization of similar size to the Regional Homelessness Authority, and that at least a majority of the members of the implementation board must be able to demographically represent and be accountable to communities that are overrepresented amongst those experiencing homelessness within King County. And both of those requirements are features of the interlocal agreement.
Jenny Durkin.
I just want to, Angela, I think really good point. I think part of this meeting is it's a forcing event for all of us. I will confess that in the last 2 months, I have not given the amount of attention to this board as I would have had the pandemic not hit. And that, you know, my own staff came to me and said, here's what we're doing. We've got someone from Sound City, someone from the exec, someone from each of the councils, someone from you. We're going to start moving forward and make sure we get someone for lived experience. And so I think having this meeting is to answer those exact questions, to make sure we're on track. I really have to commend the staff for everything they've done in the middle of this pandemic to also keep this process going forward, and to be so transparent about where they feel they need direction from any of the board members. So don't feel shy if when you get the list, you feel like you as a member here want to have a little bit different configuration. And to the members with lived experience, I will say, we're sorry that it's taken us long to get this staff up and running for you, so you have your own independent staff to rely on. But we're going to get there. We'll get there together. And, my only amendment to what you said, Mr. Executive, that's coming is, I think we should presume at least no more than 90-minute meetings unless we really need 2 hours. I think a requirement of, and I would even argue for 60 be the normal course, but I'll make my time available, whatever everyone decides.
Thank you. I have to agree that most of what can happen in a 2-hour meeting can happen in a 90-minute meeting, and most of what can happen in 90 minutes can happen in 60. The time frame seems somehow to focus people, and sometimes they're more productive when the meetings are shorter. Leo and company are looking for an affirmation of the process and timing. Same process as before. Does anyone have any objections or need further clarification? All right, then, oh yes, Nancy Backus.
Thank you. I just want to say that I want us to make sure that we are providing enough time to these meetings. While it may be frustrating to have 2-hour meetings, especially to begin with, I want to make sure that we are getting everything out in the open and that we are making sure that we all understand what we are here to do and how it needs to be accomplished. So while 1-hour meetings are great, 90-minute meetings are great, if it's 2 hours that we need to begin with, I certainly would urge us to ensure that we take that time dedicated to this process.
Okay. On this, we're going to then consider this process affirmed and move to the next item on the agenda. And I want to remind you that it's been 2 months now. On March 23rd, Governor Inslee issued a proclamation. The proclamation was entitled 2028, specifying that local agencies may conduct public meetings only online or via remote access, and also the order limited action at such meetings to matters that are necessary to address COVID or that are otherwise necessary and routine. The governor's current order is in effect through the 31st of this month. Now, during this portion of the agenda, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority Governing Committee may take action on 2 necessary and routine items: establishing a meeting schedule for the remainder of 2020 and designating a chair or chairs from among its membership. These action items are routine organizational matters that are regularly and routinely undertaken by local government committees. These steps are necessary to enable the authority to begin providing essential planning and service delivery in accordance with the principles set forth in the interlocal agreement for the establishment of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Facilitating this coordinated emergency response to chronic regional homelessness through these administrative actions is particularly essential during the unprecedented COVID-19 public health crisis. Now to the business at hand. Each of you received a scheduling survey to identify available times for regular meetings of the governing committee. My understanding is that everyone stated their availability during the 3rd Thursday of the month from 10 a.m. until noon. And so as we're now entering into the formal business part of today's agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting calendar for the remainder of 2020 for the 3rd Thursday of the month from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Is there such a motion?
This is Nancy Backus. I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Lorena Gonzalez. Is there discussion on that meeting schedule? All right, then moving to a vote, I believe that we need to, because this is a virtual meeting, even though this is a fairly routine matter, we want to make sure that there's a record of the vote. And so I'm going to go ahead and call for a roll call on this matter, and I'm going to ask Sarah, if you have a roster of the members in front of you, if you could please call the roll.
Mayor Backus?
Aye.
Mayor Burney?
Aye.
Executive Constantine?
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn,
Aye.
Mayor Durkin,
Aye.
Council President Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Hemphill,
Aye.
Councilmember Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. McLean,
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott,
Aye.
Councilmember Prince,
Aye.
Ms. Reed.
Aye.
That concludes the roll call vote. It is unanimous.
May I ask one clarifying question?
Yes, please, Nancy Backus.
Were we talking about a July 2nd meeting for this organization, for this board, or did I misunderstand that?
Leo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We now have the committee's direction, and the July 2nd meeting will now be on the third Thursday of June, and then we'll follow through with that for the remainder of the month. So what I was saying about July 2nd will either be business disposed in the third Thursday of June or the third Thursday of July.
All right. So by your vote, we've established a meeting schedule the third Thursday from 10 a.m. until noon. I would note that it will be the chair's prerogative to cancel meetings as the implementation board ramps up its work and the CEO comes on board. And that over time we will achieve a meeting rhythm that was set by the ILA, which was quarterly. However, for the time being, we are committed to a monthly meeting schedule. Next on the agenda.
Before we, sorry to interject,
yeah,
before we move on, Councilmember McDermott had a question.
Joe McDermott.
Oh, nope, never mind. I'll lower your hand.
Okay. And then I believe it's off to Jenny Durkin.
Thank you. And I think the last part of the regular business that needs to be raised here but not resolved is that we have the bylaws have to be adopted under the terms of the ILA. And Leo, perhaps you could address the process by which those are being drafted now, how members here can give input and how it comes back to the board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We also do acknowledge that bylaw refinement was a matter of unresolved business that Council President Gonzalez did mention at the beginning of the meeting. We have retained a firm that is able to provide a baseline pro forma set of bylaws that are customary for a committee such as this. We propose to take that to the same staff committee or staff group that will be doing the nominating process, at which point we could incorporate the direction of all members of the governing committee, and that set of bylaws would then become the basis for deliberation by this committee in subsequent meetings, if that process would satisfy members of the committee. But recognizing that we do not yet have established bylaws, and that establishment of bylaws will be necessary for the business of the committee.
And I think just a friendly proviso to that is we understand that Seattle City Council had some direct concerns, some members of that, with regards to the bylaws, as did one or more members of the county council. We want to work to make sure that in this process, if we can't resolve those, that we have those presented as an issue that the board can address. So we'll be looking to those members, and particularly you, President Gonzalez, to make sure that we have a way to get your thoughts and concerns directly addressed in this process and teed up quickly if we can't resolve it. If there's members of either Sound City's lived experience or county council that have specific concerns on those bylaws, they would also give those directions to their members of that committee. And that we'll have a process, obviously iterative, of we can talk to each other, get reports back. And hopefully, if we can't get strong concurrence within that, have a very established way to address that at our next meeting so that we can get those bylaws drafted and adopted. Is that fair, Leo?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Council President Gonzalez.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that we're not taking action on this particular item today. I think there's a at least from my perspective, some unresolved issues, as mentioned by Leo and by Mayor Durkin. And, you know, I just sort of I guess I want to get a better sense of what the process is for submitting some of those bylaws issues that I believe need to be addressed and should be addressed. You know, who do I send them to? By when do we need to send in those issues? And then, in order to try to achieve some level of concurrence, you know, what does that look like in terms of our interaction with each other before we're asked to take a final vote on the bylaws? So those are sort of 3 process-related questions that I have. And then after you're done answering those, I just want to sort of put a pin in some of the remaining issues that I believe exist that should be addressed through the bylaws. I just want to make sure that I air those publicly and with all of you. I've you know, put those issues at the end of last year into letters and public remarks, but I want to take an opportunity to go through the list of the things that I think are remaining issues now before we adjourn.
Thank you, Council President Gonzalez. To the first part of the question, the primary method, I think you have a staff representative on the regularly meeting staff committee, Mr. Ryder, who certainly could be a conduit for that information to that committee. Certainly, I think to the extent that you wanted to, I'd certainly be happy to relay that information. The committee does meet weekly, and I think we will have a goal of at least having a update at a month from now for the committee on what those bylaws look like. And so I think certainly before that meeting or a week before that meeting, if you were able to provide that information to Mr. Ryder to that staff committee, that would be the primary way to get it into the staffing process. And then if the bylaws are ripe for a vote, that could happen in June. And if they are not yet ripe for a vote, that you might choose to have that as a committee on your agenda for the next meeting to give some more shape or direction to the staff committee so that we could go back, refine that process and product, and then present it in July.
Great, that's helpful information. I'll make sure to do that. And then just really quickly, I just want to go through some of the remaining issues as I see them, so that you know, folks hear directly from me what I think those issues are. I obviously don't intend to sort of stimulate a conversation around these issues now, but do feel that for public transparency purposes, it's important for me to just articulate them really quickly. So the first one is that I believe that that amendments to the authority's goals, policies, and plans, or the authority's annual budget should require an affirmative vote of at least 8 governing committee members. Currently, that language is a little vague and is unclear as to how many votes are required to address the specific goals, policies, and plans and modifications to those. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we have 8 governing committee members supporting that. The second is to receive governing committee approval. Plans for funding and provision of services must be consistent with evidence-based practices and the authority's guiding principles outlined in Article 4, Section 3 of the Interlocal Agreement. The third would be to receive governing committee approval for the 5-year plan or subsequent plans that, again, have to align with evidence-based practices and the authority's guiding principles outlined in the same section I just referenced. And then the last one is to receive governing committee approval. Sub-regional plans must be informed by the regional action plan and align with evidence-based practices and the guiding principles outlined in Article 4, Section 3 of the Interlocal Agreement. Of course, there may be other issues that come up on behalf of the Seattle City Council that I'll make sure to highlight, but I can say that based on the previous City Council at the end of 2019, these were some of the most significant issues of concern to that body. And certainly I'll work with Councilmember Lewis as chair of the Select Committee on Homelessness issues for the City Council and the rest of our colleagues to make sure that we have a full list of any other issues that are of importance to the Seattle City Council that we believe should be addressed through the bylaws process. Thank you.
We have a question from Jonathan Hempel. Jonathan Hemphill.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm multitasking. I wanted to echo everything Mr. Gonzalez said, President Gonzalez said. I also, on the first part though, my concern is not to have an 8-member, but maybe a 9-member agreement when we amend bylaws and rules and policies and changes, just to make sure that when we don't get into a stalemate or a lock, that we have a vote that's able to break that. That's all.
Anyone else on the bylaws? There's no action on this today. This was just a status update on their development. Anything further? Angela Burney, I see your fingers. There you go.
Multiple screens, sorry. So the bylaws have not been drafted yet correctly. Is there a draft or something? I was searching, trying to find something. Can you fill me in on that?
Thank you, Mayor Burney. There is no draft bylaw right now that is specifically tailored to the governing committee. We do, again, have what I described earlier as a pro forma or sort of standard set of bylaws that we do need to do some tailoring work to propose then to the committee. But to answer your question, there is nothing specifically tailored or drafted yet for the governing committee right now.
Okay, thank you. The way Council President Gonzalez was speaking, I was thinking I'd missed something, and I do apologize. As we all know, we've been started the end of last year, and then we're in May now. So I'm making sure that I have all the parts and pieces to be a good representative on here. So I feel like I just keep asking for more paperwork, but it's just really so I have it all collected in one place, and I hope that's helpful to the other members as well, that we're all on the same page as we're working. So thanks.
Councilmember Lewis, did you have a question?
No, I did not. Thank you.
Nancy Backus?
Yes, just a request that we have ample time to review the bylaws, so at least a week or so in advance of the next meeting, because I think we're all wanting to go through them with a fine-tooth comb at that point in time to ensure the fairness. So just as much lead time as we can possibly have would be great. Thank you.
Jenny Durkin?
Yeah, and I just want to also comment, I'm as guilty as everyone with being a little behind the curve and reading the materials that we got. And I think with our meeting that we're coming now is the reason we have the staff committee is for them to do the work, but not just on their own. We're supposed to be engaging with them. So I'll have to engage with mine, and each member is going to have to engage so that we can get some of that work. And I think Leo and Jason have committed to getting us, and then we've all just got to make the commitment that we actually read them, maybe ask our staff representatives questions to resolve as much of that as we can. And it's gonna be more challenging in this day of Zoom, particularly given everything that everybody's doing just to get by in their lives, let alone their jobs. So I just think we're all going to have to make the double commitment to read stuff in advance, to talk to our staff, to have them give input, and see how much of that work we can get before the meetings. And I'm guilty. I was trying to read through my materials as we were sitting here, a lot of them, because I read through them a couple weeks ago. But so it's going to be hard, but I know we'll get it done.
Nancy Backus?
Thanks. Just one more item for clarity. Leo, when you're talking about the weekly meetings, have those been occurring, or is that the plan moving forward? Because I hadn't heard that the staff groups had been meeting on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my lack of clarity. The staff meeting, I'm not sure if it's been every other week or 3 weeks, but there's been a staff committee meeting that's been happening to date. I am presuming that that staff committee meeting are about to go weekly or more than weekly, as we will, in order to be able to provide with sufficient notice the materials for meeting, I think we are all going to have to do some calendar rearrangement pretty quickly here so that we can keep this moving.
Anyone else, Sarah?
No one else?
Okay. So bylaws, an ongoing work project. We have, I think, one more item, which is a motion to select chair of this committee. And I would entertain a motion now. Joe McDermott.
Thank you, Executive Constantine. I would move that we elect Councilmember Prince, Mayor Durkin, and Executive Constantine as co-chairs of this body.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Lewis is seconded, I believe. Was that right? And okay, discussion. Joe McDermott.
Thank you. Both in the meeting today and in the work of all three of these individuals over the last months and frankly years, they have demonstrated leadership and dedication to the issue we are addressing, homelessness within our region. I know them all to be collaborative leaders who will work with all of us and the community to move us forward. And I would ask your support in asking them to take on the responsibility of serving as co-chairs.
Sarah?
I would.
Oh, up next, we have Jonathan Hemphill.
I would like to amend that or push back on that motion. There's no person, you have not mentioned a person with lived experience, and that's the central focus of this organization that we're trying to stand up. I, for myself, have also been, and many others, all three of us have been in community and have been working on this issue. And I actually drafted the theory of change framework. And I also have roots into the community service and being a part of the Poor People's Campaign, which was a movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968 to end homelessness and poverty throughout the United States of America. So I would like to say that you need to have people with lived experience in that if you're going to have a co-chair system and or no, just that.
Okay, that is a proposed amendment to the motion, I believe. Is there a second to the proposed amendment?
I will second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay, board member or Councilmember Gonzalez.
Just really quickly, if Jonathan can address, is he interested in serving as one of the co-chairs, or just believes one of the three folks should be somebody with lived experience should be the co-chair?
I'm interested in being in the co-chair, but I'm also interested if any of my other folks who have lived experience are also interested, that they also have the opportunity to serve in this capacity as well.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that clarification. So folks on the line, I tend to agree with Jonathan that I think it is really important to have the co-chair roles, particularly if the proposal is to have three chairs to be reflective of the realities of those who have lived experiences and provide those members with lived experiences an opportunity to provide leadership in this space. One of the main concerns that was raised in the debate of creating and approving this authority via the ILA, both I think on the county side and certainly on the city council side, was sort of the danger of creating a governing committee or a structure that would be too heavily influenced by elected officials and politicians on an issue that is already heavily politicized. So I think providing an opportunity for somebody with lived experience to serve in one of the three co-chair capacities would really send, I think, a strong signal both to our service providers and to those representing lived experiences that we are serious as elected officials about taking a more transformative change to this work and allowing those with lived experience to serve as a co-equal co-chair. I think would send a very strong signal that we are indeed serious about taking a different approach as we are being asked to on this particular issue. So I have a huge amount of respect for Councilmember Prince and for Mayor Durkin and for Executive Constantine, and certainly my remarks are not intended to be dismissive of their ability or capacity or desire to serve, and respect Councilmember McDermott's original motion, but do feel that it's important for us to, in the structure of setting up this this committee, to support the effort of really baking in those folks with lived experience into our leadership model. Thank you.
So it seems like we have a range of choices. We can have 4 co-chairs, which is a lot. I mean, 3 is a lot, 4 is a lot. We could have a chair and 3 co-vice chairs, and we can table the motion and take this up in June. Who's next, Sarah?
Next, we have Nancy Backus, Angela Burney, and then Joe McDermott. So Nancy Backus, you can go first.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would, if we are going to go down this path, I would highly recommend that we have someone from each organization. Then we have someone from King County, someone from Seattle, someone with lived experience, and someone from Sound Cities Association. While that gets very clunky, I had a gut feeling we were going to move in this direction, so I would really like to propose. I'll stop short of making a motion until after everyone has had an opportunity to speak.
There's a motion on the table.
Right, but make an amendment to the motion.
Okay. Who's next, Sarah?
Angela Burney.
Thank you. I guess for me, there's only 12 of us part of this, so a quarter being the chair seems a little bit challenging, for sure. Not just from our organizational standpoint, not from a representation standpoint. But I do just want to clarify what the role of the chair is. I think if I read correctly in the original ILA, it was just to make sure, just to run the meeting and to make sure there was support for the agenda. So perhaps we should have some opportunity to think about what that role of that chair really is. And then in a lot of the other regional committees, generally we have caucus chairs. And so I think to your comment, Executive Constantine, thinking about how we can structure this governance in a way that makes sense for all of us, just so we feel represented.
Who is next, Sarah?
Next, we have Joe McDermott, Andrew Lewis, and then Jenny Durkin. So Joe McDermott, you can go.
Thank you. As maker of the motion, I would be happy to have a friendly amendment. Mr. Hemphill's amendment be a friendly amendment to the motion. But I have heard that perhaps there's more conversation and would like to hear from Ms. Reed and Mr. McLean about what name might be added to the motion. Mr. Hemphill has expressed his interest. I'd be interested in making sure that there was a robust conversation about all the co-chairs might be. But I wanted to be clear, I would welcome an expansion of the co-chairs.
Yeah, I'll chime in here, and I don't know parliamentary procedure that well, but I guess this is an amendment, or this is my opinion. I would support Jonathan Hemphill being on as a candidate. Myself personally, I have no experience with that at all. I think that's air above my head personally. But like I said, I'm willing to learn these things. However, I think that that position would probably be better served by someone like Jonathan with his experience and apparently his knowledge about how these things work. So that's my suggestion. I would put forth Jonathan as a candidate for chair or co-chair.
Zanetta Reed.
So I think it's a great idea to have somebody with lived experience as a co-chair. if that was a possibility. I mean, I'm not sure why it wasn't in the first place. If you're having people with lived experience on the board, you would think that would be something that would have been a given to give somebody with lived experience a chance. So I definitely think that that would be great. I myself would love to be a co-chair too. So yes, I think it's, yeah.
So let me make, where we are right now is we have Joe McDermott's motion, we have Jonathan Hempel's amendment. Joe McDermott is listening to see if he wants to accept that as a friendly amendment, which would then take us back to the main motion. And a suggestion from Angela Burney that perhaps we have a system with each caucus essentially having a chair. And one possibility there, if I may observe, is my own comment, is that we could have that system and then have those chairs rotating, and you know, the chair role, which is essentially holding the gavel and running the meeting. The staff does most of the work, brings the information to all board members, but the chair is the person who's doing what I'm doing right now. And if we could, I'm not going to say if we could, I would move that we table this until the next meeting and have conversations about that structure. And among the representatives of people with lived experience, if there's a conversation to be had about who might fill that caucus chair role, that would be helpful to the rest of us to be able to have some clarity about that. So I'm making a motion to table until the June meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's moved in second and non-debatable. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. All right. With that, we are at the end of today's agenda as I understand it. Does any of the staff have anything else that I've forgotten to bring up today? No? Okay. Well, so our next meeting is on the third Thursday in June at 10 a.m. in this very location, presumably. And we're looking forward to seeing everyone there with clarity about the chair structure and the people who will fill those roles, and with a spreadsheet or a chart that we are all able to read with our aging eyes. So until then, thank you so much. Yes, Jenny Durkin.
I just want to again thank everyone for being here, but also give additional thanks to Leo and to Jason, to the teams behind them. Because when we say staff, I've seen those staff over the last 2 months putting in 15 and 16-hour days, literally day after day, to really deal with this pandemic in a way that we could set up isolation and quarantine facilities, more shelter, more testing, more hygiene. And in their spare time, they've done all this to move us forward. So just my tremendous thanks to you for the work you've been doing.
Anyone else? We have arrived at the appointed hour, noon, and if we adjourn the meeting now, we will have completed our last task of adjourning on time. So thank you everyone for being here, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.